Hello, sixth graders, and welcome to the first lesson in Chapter 5. In Chapter 5, we'll be discussing all about ratios and rates. In Section 1 specifically, we're going to focus on ratios. Today for our learning target, we have I can use ratios to describe the relationship between two quantities. Okay. A lot of times when students hear the word rational number, they get a little bit confused, and I remember it used to confuse me too, but look at the base word here is ratio. So we're going to look at what a ratio is and all the different ways that we can write ratios. Let's start off by defining what a ratio is, and that is it's a comparison of two quantities. Ratios can be part to part, they can be part to whole, or whole to part comparisons. And it depends on the situation, but we'll discuss a few different scenarios here of where you can have these three different comparisons. Excuse me. So starting with just looking at what we've got here, it says 2 red crayons to 6 blue crayons. All right, there's 2 reds and there are a total of 6 blue. That would be a part-to-part comparison. And it also says there are 3 blue crayons per 1 red crayon. So they just took this and they simplified it. Okay, you could say there's 3 blue crayons for each red crayon. That's kind of the same thing. Or 3 blue crayons out of every 4 crayons. Okay, lots of different ways you can say this, and you can write ratios a bunch of different ways as well. For example, you could write it with the word 2, so you could say 3 to 1, or you could write it with a semicolon, so you could say 3 to 1 this way. You could even write it as a fraction and saying 3 to 1 this way. Lots of different ways to write ratios, lots of different ways to compare numbers. Let's see what that might look like in a few examples. Okay, the first one, we've got this picture here, and it says you have the coins shown. Write the ratio of pennies to quarters. All right, so pennies, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pennies. Okay, so 6. And to quarters, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 6, and I'm going to use the semicolon this time. 6 to 7. And notice that since it said pennies first, I put my number of pennies first. And quarters second, I put quarters second. So that's kind of important. You need to follow that correct order, or your ratio would be incorrect. Remember, you could also write it like this, 6 to 7 that way. That would work as well. All right, for the next one, it says ratio of quarters to dimes. Okay, so we've already figured out the number of quarters is 7. And to dimes, let's see how many dimes I've got. 1, 2, 3. Looks like I've got 3, so 7 to 3. And for letter C, it says write the ratio of dimes to the total number of coins. Okay, so dimes, I figured I have 3 to, okay, total number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So 3 to 16 would be that ratio. Again, first is dimes, and then is total number. Follow the correct order there. All right, go ahead and pause the video next for the on your own. Okay, in example 1, write the ratio of dimes to pennies. Okay, dimes I had 3 and pennies I had 6. So I would say 3 to 6. Sometimes they'll ask you to simplify this as well. So if you simplified 3 to 6, you could divide each of these by 3. So you could say 1 to 2, and that would be the same ratio, but it doesn't ask us to do that, so we'll just leave it as 3 to 6 and the actual number that there are. And number 2 says the circle graph shows the favorite ice cream toppings for several students. So we got peanuts, fudge, sprinkles, and caramel. Use ratio language to compare the number of students who favor peanuts to the total number. Okay, so for peanuts, I would say 5 out of, and the total here, if you add all these, you come up with 19 students favor peanuts. Okay, that's what it means when it says ratio language. So put it in a sentence form like that. All right? Let's move on to a little bit of vocabulary. And it says a blank blank. The missing word here is a tape diagram. As a diagram that looks like a segment of tape. Okay, so imagine this is a segment of tape. It shows the relationship between two quantities. I'm going to warn you here that tape diagrams can be a little bit tricky until you figure out how to use them. Okay, so let's dive into example 2 here. It says the ratio of your monthly allowance to your friend's monthly allowance is 5 to 3. Okay, so your monthly allowance comes first and your friend's comes next. So that means this is you, this is your friend. So 5 to 3. So off the bat, you can see that you're going to make more money than your friend is. Okay. We take a tape diagram and we split it into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts, just like it tells us here, and your friends into 3 parts. Okay, so that's the first step is creating that tape. In your homework, a lot of times it won't be created for you, so you'll have to actually create this tape. All right. The monthly allowances total $40. So that means between you and your friend, everything, that's $40. How much is each allowance? Okay. Well, the trick here is to be able to find the total number of parts. So if you have 5 and your friend has 3, there's 8 total parts. And to find how much each part is worth, you take your total and divide it by your total number of parts. In this case, our total allowance was $40, and we divide that by our total number of parts. So if we had 5 and your friend had 3, 5 plus 3 would be 8. Okay, 5 divided by 8 gives you how much each one of these segments is worth. Okay, so that would give us 5. Each one of these is worth $5. Okay, you could fill that out for each one. Okay, so how much is each allowance? Well, yours would be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So your allowance is $25, and your friend's allowance will equal, okay, 5, 10, 15 dollars. Okay, so that is how you use a tape diagram. Now, if you were to take 25 over 15 and simplify it, let's do that. What is a common factor between these two? Well, 5. So 25 divided by 5 would be 5, and 15 divided by 5 would be 3. You get back to that original ratio that we had. Okay. So probably one of your first times seeing a tape diagram. We'll get some more practice with it with the next example and even on your own. So don't be too worried about it now. Just practice it. That's all it takes, and you'll get better. I see that I'm running out of time here, so I'll pause the video and come back with example 3. Okay, in example 3, we're going to use a tape diagram again, and it says you separate 42 bulbs of garlic into 2 groups, one for planting and one for cooking. Okay, those 2 groups are going to be your 2 tapes. Okay, so I'll have a planting group and I'll have a cooking group. Okay, you will plant 3 bulbs for every 4 bulbs that you will use for cooking. Okay, so plant 3. So in my tape diagram here, I'm going to separate that into 3 for planting. And for my cooking, every 4 bulbs you'll use for cooking. So I'm going to make that into 4 segments for cooking. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Each bulb has about 8 cloves. So here's a bulb, kind of looks like an onion almost. And when you open that bulb open, there are 8 cloves. Okay. That we don't need to know quite yet because we have our total and we have our tape. This information will come at the end because all it wants to know is how many cloves will you plant. Okay, so first we'll find out what information goes in each one of these tapes. So remember, take your total. So we have 42 total bulbs. Total is equal to 42. And divide it by your total total parts. Okay, well, if we have 3 for planting and 4 for cooking, 3 plus 4 would give us 7. So we need to take 42 divided by 7, and that would give us how much each one of these segments is going to be worth. Okay, so 42 divided by 7 would give us 6. So each one of these segments will give us 6. Okay, 6 equal parts. Okay, so that is equal to 6. Now, keep in mind, we're still on bulbs. Okay, so if we have 42 total bulbs and we want our ratio to be 3 to 4, what is our total going to look like? Well, for planting, 6 times 3 would give us 18 bulbs that we're going to keep for planting. And for cooking, 6, 12, 18, 24 bulbs for cooking. All right. But the question asks, how many cloves will you plant? All right. Well, if we have 18 bulbs and each bulb has 8 cloves, we need to take this and multiply it by 8 to figure out how many cloves that we're going to be planting. So 18 times 8. 8 times 8 fell on the floor. Pick it up, it's 64. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 6 is 14. Okay, so 144 cloves is what we will plant. All right, so there's a little bit more practice. Again, man, if I were you, I'd be sure to be writing all of this down because you can reference it back come test time, and you're going to need to be able to use a tape diagram on your test for sure. Okay, so if you didn't, I'd encourage you to pause now and do that. While you're paused, go ahead and try the 2 on your own problems here, 3 and 4, and then come back to see if you got them correct. All right, for 3, it says, what if in example 2, the ratio is 2 to 3? How much is each allowance? Okay, so now we got you and your friend, and our ratio now is 2 to 3. Okay, and if we took our total allowance, which was $40, and we divided it by our total number of parts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we would come up with $8, and that's how much each segment of our tape diagram would be worth. So 8 times 2, your allowance will give $16. And your friends, 8 times 3 here, would be $24. Okay. And lastly, for number 4, it says, what if in example 3 you plant 1 bulb for every 2 bulbs that you will use for cooking? Okay, so now for planting, we just plant 1, and for cooking, we do 2. So planting and cooking, okay? And remember our total was 42. So we would take that 42 total and divide it by our number of parts, which is 3. And 42 divided by 3, let's do that quick. 1 time, which is 3, subtract, bring down my 2. So it'll be 14. Each one of these would be worth 14. All right? And it says, will you plant more or fewer cloves than originally planned? Okay, well, this is planting, and we have 14 that we're going to plant. Remember, each one of these bulbs has a total of, what do we say, 8 cloves. So 14 bulbs, or that would be the same as if you took 14 times 8, that would give you 112 cloves. Okay, the question asks, will you plant more or fewer cloves than originally planned? Well, here's 112, and originally we had 114, so that would be fewer. And reason being is because, well, originally we had planned to plant 114, and if you changed your ratio to 1 to 2, that would make it so it'd be only 112, so that'd be 32 fewer than originally planned. Okay, so hopefully you're starting to catch on with these tape diagrams. If you need some more help, please feel free to ask, but biggest thing is take your total and divide it by your total number of parts to find out how much each one of these segments is worth. All right, that does it for the first section, talking about ratios. Let me know if you have more questions. Good luck with the homework, and I'll see you next time.